that a flaw in a character trait is way more enrooted in a person.
Welcome to Prism of Torah with Rebbe Saf Aaron Prisman, engaging Divrei Torah, packed with stories and practical insights. Find us wherever you get your podcasts or at prismoftorah.org.
In this week's Parsha, there's two types of enemies. At the end of the Parsha, we talk about Amalek. Amalek is a nation that despised anything to do with spirituality. And hence they came all the way from Rephidim, running after the Jewish people, even after the whole world saw how many miracles HaKadosh Baruch Hu did for us, just to get rid of them, because they did not want any spirituality in the world. And hence they tried to totally kill us. And we know that the Torah says there's a big mitzvah to wipe them away. Timches zecher Amalek. The other type of enemies were Ammon and Moav. What they did bad was they refused to give us bread and water, even for money. And they also hired Bilam to try and curse us, which Baruch Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu stopped that. But if you were to ask yourself, which one of these nations would you think HaKadosh Baruch Hu says they are banned from marrying a Jew forever? You would think Amalek, way worse. You even have a mitzvah to kill them. Well, guess what? Based on the Rambam and the Ravid, who say that an Amalek who realizes what life is all about and that the whole Amalek way of thinking that there's no spirituality in the world is wrong, and they took upon themselves the 7 mitzvahs of Noach, the Sheva mitzvahs Bnei Noach, then there's no more mitzvah to kill them, and one does not have to kill them anymore. Put that together with the famous Gemara, the Gemara that Chazal tell us in Gittin, that Haman's own descendants learned Torah in Bnei Brak. It comes out that once an Amalek, someone that used to be an Amalek, we'll call him an ex-Amalek, that took upon himself a new outlook of what life is all about, and took upon himself the Sheva mitzvahs Bnei Noach, then they actually have the ability to marry a Jewish person. This is not like the Mechilta, but that's what comes out based on what the Rambam says, because the Rambam never says anywhere that they cannot convert and be part of the Jewish people and marry Jewish people, as opposed to Ammon and Moav, who cannot marry Jewish people, as it says in our Parsha. We'll just open the bracket here and say, when I say that Ammon and Moav cannot marry Jewish people, I'm actually saying, yes, they can convert, but they can't marry a regular Jewish person. They can only marry a mamzer or someone like them, but they cannot lavo b'kal Hashem and marry a pure Jewish person. Close bracket. So the question is, what is the deep understanding of this differentiation? One would think the opposite. Someone that came on a nationality level that despises spirituality and HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Klal Yisrael, they should be totally banned. They should be the one banned from marrying into pure Jewish heritage. As opposed to Ammon and Moav, okay, so they didn't give us bread and water. Okay, so they tried to curse us out. But surely they can change. Why shouldn't they be able to marry into pure Jewish heritage? And I would like to share with you an answer. Perhaps, and I heard this from Yonasan Geffen, a friend of mine, and I want to share it with you and I want to add to it a bit. Perhaps from here we see a concept that is known. The concept is that a flaw in a character trait is way more enrooted in a person and way more difficult to uproot, especially when the whole environment is like that and it's on a nationality level. And hence, Ammon and Moav were corrupted at the root of their character traits. Why? Because at the end of the day, they owed a lot to the Jewish people. They both of those nations are descendants of Lot. Lot is someone that Avram Avinu, one of our forefathers, saved Lot. He saved Lot and his whole nation with that big war between the kings. So not only did they not have a karas hatoiv, appreciation for what the Jewish people did for them, but they actually did the opposite and did bad for us. That shows a major flaw in character traits. And a flaw in character traits that is enrooted in a nation that doesn't have room to mix and match with pure Jewish blood. However, despite the initial feeling that Amalek is the worst thing ever. But that's external to the character traits. And perception can change if someone is really searching for the emes, for the truth. And hence, they do have a potential that once they took upon themselves, we realize who's running the world and the purpose of the world, and yes, we'll happily accept. Like the Rambam says, we'll accept the Sheva Mitzvahs Bnei Noach. That's a game changer. And now, they do have potential based on this Rambam and the Gemara, that they have a potential to mingle in and become part of Jewish blood and Jewish heritage. This distinction between a not proper hashkafa and a bad character trait is brought by that Drashus Haran. The Drashus Haran says that it's very interesting that Avram, when he got his Eved Eliezer to go find a wife for Rivka, he refused under all circumstances that a Canaanite, would marry Yitzchak, because we know from Chazal many places that they had real bad midos, bad character traits. However, he was okay and actually wanted that his son would marry someone from Lavan's family, which we know they had a very bad hashkafa and weren't the most spiritual people. However, they did have a proper, at least based on the midos, and hence someone like Rivka can come out of it. Because she had the infrastructure of good midos, she was able to easily follow in the paths of Hashem. And Avram Avinu knew this important chiluk. There's a gra in Even Shleima. The Vilna Gaon says that the very purpose of a person's Torah, and really his whole life, is to continuously refine his midos. On a nationality level, where the whole environment has corrupted midos, it's very, very difficult to do that. But on a personal level, it's also difficult, but it's a lot more doable. And that is what we try to do in life. That's what the Gaon Vilna is saying. The Torah changes us and helps us to refine our midos. However, to be compatible with the ideal Jewish person, we have to have proper basic midos. And then we can be compatible with the Torah, and it'll elevate and fine-tune all our midos. In fact, and the new Gemaras have this at the beginning, when you say the tefillah before you start learning, it says a certain little prayer before you start learning, based on the Shla Kadosh. The Shla says one should say, Hineni rotze lilmod, I would like to learn now, kedei she'avi hatalmud lidei ma'aseh, that what I learn in Torah and the Gemara, I'll be able to bring into fruition and do mitzvahs based on what I learn. And here's the punchline. Ulidei midos yesharus. I also want to bring it into helping me fix my character traits, my midos, and to become a good person. And that is what we're continuously working on, and that is what is perfectly fitting for the month we are in, Elul, preparing ourselves now, not at the last second, for the Heilige Yom Adin, and we see the importance of midos. And this is the month to be able to do it. It's a lot easier this month, because there's a special thing in the air that HaKadosh Baruch Hu put in, that it's a time, as the Ramchal says, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes closer to us, and it's a time of change, and it's easier for us to change at this point in time. I would like to end with a story I heard from Rabbi Shlomo Landau. This happened in the late 1930s, as German Jews did everything they can to get visas to try to get out of there because they realized something very bad is starting to happen. Of course, chances were very slim. It was very impossible to obtain such a visa. But there was a young mother of two, that there was one office, a single government office in Berlin, that were still issuing the visas. Since it was very dangerous for her husband to travel, so she left the children with him in their small town and made the difficult journey alone. She arrived to find huge lines stretching out the doors and around the block. She waited and waited an entire day. It was hot. It was difficult. And then, at a closing time, a clerk came out and told the whole crowd to come back tomorrow. She found a place to sleep and returned at dawn, waiting hours after hours, as her hope slowly went away as she saw what was happening. And suddenly, her nightmare became a reality. The clerk emerged and came out and said, "I'm sorry, the visas are finished." There are none left. Everyone was screaming. Everyone was so upset. They just ran away and were screaming. But this woman, with nothing left to lose, simply came up to the clerk and said, "Thank you so much. Thanks for trying. Have a good day," and turned away and walked, crushed at her heart. She started walking back home. After half a block, she suddenly hears footsteps behind her and a voice calling out to her, and it was the clerk. "You thanked me? You wished me a good day? You are the only person that ever did that." And then he said, "You know what? I think I can get a couple more visas. How much do you need? How many do you need?" And she said, "For me, my husband, my 2 kids." And that clerk wrote it out for exactly those people. They got the visas, and through that, they were able to survive the war. Today, she has grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all thanks to a single sentence that revealed the level of midos, character traits she had, just with the words, "Thank you so much, have a good day." Yeh Ratzon that we understand the importance of continuously working on our midos to mimic HaKadosh Baruch Hu's midos. Just like his rachum, we should be rachum. We should think about what others need, how we can help others, and how we can be givers and not takers. Have a good Shabbos.
This concludes another episode of the Prism of Torah. Thank you for tuning in today. We hope you enjoyed it and learned something valuable. If you did, please subscribe to the podcast and give a 5-star rating. You can also find this podcast wherever you get your podcasts or our own website, prismoftorah.com, where we have a full archive of all our past episodes. We would like to thank Yona Vefa for the recording equipment and Eli Podcast Productions for handling all our post-podcast productions. Join us next week for another enlightening conversation on the Prism of Torah.